have to look at books that are being read in the classroom. We have to look at music that the teachers play when they're doing their dance recitals or their dance performances. We have to look at music that's played at the rally. Like, it has to be a comprehensive approach to it. But I think the first step is to say, you're not gonna read it, write it, or, when you're texting or when you're group text or whatever the harm is, we're gonna stop the racialized harm by saying no slurs at school. I'm complete.
Okay, so it sounds like everybody's in agreement of moving NSS. Okay, so hopefully we'll put on the agenda for the 18th for action.
Dr. Hurst added the documents, everybody needs to be there.
Oh, okay. Okay, and the agenda was updated a little bit just on some documents that were uploaded, so if you have it on your computer, please just refresh your computer. Make sure that you have the right documents. Okay, so now we're gonna move to item 2, which is our review policy of 5145.3, which is our non-discrimination/harassment policy. And for this one, we did get some feedback. Is the feedback incorporated already on this one?
I believe it's not.
Not, okay.
Great. But I do have a document that is, has the appropriate recommendation from our legal team. And I can share my screen and forward that to Nancy, so she can upload as well.
That'd be great, thank you.
Could you also forward to Dr. Hurst? He has the ability to upload immediately.
Thank you. You know my answer. Yeah.
And then Mr. Espinosa, was the feedback from legal about the changes that were requested from the board?
Yes.
Okay,
So
got it.
I was gonna go into detail.
Okay.
Well, I can share my screen.
Yeah.
so you can-
No problem, I was just curious. Take your time.
Does he have sharing capability? I'm gonna go ahead and put it on. Sharing's not turned on. It's on, right? Okay.
I love looking together. And then.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
And I'll send Dr. Hurst, email.
Thank you.
Nancy, what's your email?
Nancy.Ortiz hyphen Perez
It's not
More than one person.
Email.
Is this what legal has said? Indeed?
We'll connect this one. Okay. Thank you.
It's just four cases in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just go to
I'm gonna promote you.
I mean, they need to be.
Okay, so I will go through the edits that they suggested right now.
They is legal.
They is legal.
Okay.
So legal suggested the edits in blue, and that's to provide the education, publicizing the district's non-discrimination policy to students, parents, and employees within the district, and the district is currently doing that. And then that's in regards to postings and trainings as well. The district's legal also requested to update the protected characteristics, within this policy. So as you see, your nationality, pregnancy, childbirth, termination of pregnancy or lactation, family, they added several categories so that will update that information. And in regards to the updates, what, a trustee Reckler requested, we did put the, webpage for the area 1, 2, and 3 so that the public can access the district's webpage and see which, executive director oversees that specific area.
Mm,
In regards to the question in regards to the legal definition for harassment and discrimination, that's included in this section as well. So then they provided that information in regards to unlawful discrimination, harassment, intimidation. And then the policy also addresses some discipline, so they thought it would be a great opportunity to include some information in regards to discipline for students. So that information is reflected in this paragraph. Then they discuss retaliation as well. In regards to the question for racialized harm, Dr. Hurst did review this with Dr. Rogers Art and change the language from such as environment to a safe learning environment.
mm,
And then this discusses the discipline process as well.
mm.
And in regards to adding the language that trustee Reckler identified for gender identity and gender expression, that specific information would have to be vetted through our legal team further if we wanted to implement it, but I did want to advise the board that currently the district does have a board policy that reflects that information in regards to gender identity and gender expression. And that policy is reflected in board policy 5145.7.
Can you repeat the policy? Sorry.
Board policy 5145.7.
Okay.
And if we did want to add additional information, what would suggest is to copy and paste from that board policy.
Mm. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Espinosa. And it's now on the agenda, so anyone's welcome to refresh it, and now it's uploaded with the changes.
And then additionally,
Sorry, go
there
ahead.
was one additional section, the citizenship for immigration status. The district does also have a board policy in regard to that, and that's board policy 5145.13.
Thank you. I don't have any feedback. Do you have any feedback?
I like cut and paste. So it stays consistent.
Yeah.
If it's gonna be in, stays consistent.
Anyone have any feedback or thoughts about the changes? Yeah, Mr. Mitchell.
I just had a question.
Yeah.
When we say the district legal, I know the district doesn't have a legal department. What are we talking about? Is that a law firm, a person, or who's making these suggestions exactly?
So for our department works with Lozano Smith. And then they're the attorneys that advise us in regards to sexual harassment, conduct that comes through our office.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. Anyone else? Yeah.
So,
Mr. Ortiz.
thank you. All of the changes and edits that we included in the last meeting have been included and then reviewed by legal, and this is their addition, so it's ready to go back to the board.
Yes. Mhm.
We're just gonna back on the 18th under action too.
Yep, so we can put it on the 18th for action. Is there any public comment on this one, Ms. Ortiz?
No public comment at this time.
Okay, wonderful. Well, great. Thank you so much, Mr. Espinosa, for that work. Let's move to the next policy. We're doing great on time. This is where we're gonna slow down. Just kidding. Sigler.
It's okay, feedback makes things wonderful.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so now we're moving to our conversation about cell phone use at schools. The last meeting, we were discussing the resolution that came to the committee, and we provided feedback. There is a clean copy that incorporated the feedback that Ms. Sigler and her team worked on. So if people want to pull it, you're welcome to pull it, but then she's also gonna share her screen in a minute.
And is it easier if I put it in the chat for people as well?
I think there's only one person, so,
Okay,
yeah.
Everybody can get it.
Yeah.
okay.
So Ms. Sigler's gonna show, sharing her screen, the red line version of the changes and the feedback that we gave.
I have the clean version all pulled up. Let me pull up the red line version. Now you're making me go through all my tabs. All right, so I have it up on the screen. And apologies because I wasn't able to make the last meeting, so I was grateful for the recording and for LaShante standing in for me. And so if I missed something, of course, let's add it. But what I really heard loud and clear was a need for reference to the state and the governor's stance on cell phones, and that this is really intended to be a ban on cell phone use, bell to bell, versus the softer language that was in the original. So that was what I attempted to incorporate under now therefore be it resolved, number one, was to just lead with that. I believe I heard the committee say 2, 3, and 4 are really covered in the language up above. Parental involvement remains, evaluation and review we could streamline. And then in the second, now therefore be it resolved, really getting specific around outlining that, you know, yes, this is a resolution, but there will be policy and procedure that is outlined that's very detailed, including a matrix of potential consequences when you violate the policy, and that the permissible use is really when it's outlined in a student's IEP and 504, and that full implementation will begin in 25-26. And so we will spend, you know, should this go through this evening and turn into a policy, the spring is really the education and planning phase. One thing I think I did not get well in here, that you guys can advise where to add. There was a conversation about wearables that I think I missed, and actually, thank you to our principals yesterday asked about that. And so, I do think we need to incorporate that still.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sigler. I think you incorporated, apart from the wearables, I think all the feedback that I remember. I did want to point out the piece that I think was really important that you brought up, President, about allowance on their IEP or 504, which we also asked for. So I think that it looks good as is with the possible change to add the wearable piece. Do you have any feedback? And then we'll open it up.
I think the wearable piece, we spent a lot of time talking about that. So I think that needs to make sure that that's incorporated in there, because it's a loophole that we need to close before it's created.
Mhm.
And I forgot who said it, but someone was like, tell us now before Christmas, before we buy the watches and we buy the, I forgot who said that, but a parent, somebody was sitting on this and said it. That's it. I'm complete.
Oh,
You remember they
It was
said it?
Ellen.
Ellen.
Yeah.
Ellen.
Oh, yeah. she was sitting
Under
right next to me.
number one, we could just add the ban on cell phone use and wearable communication devices. If it just went right there, we could insert that language.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That sounds good.
Do you want me to type it into this red?
Yeah, that'd be great if you don't mind. Any further feedback from anyone? Thoughts on the changes?
I think we have to be clear when we do this, how the impact is gonna be in the classroom. It could be a disruptor. It may not be because they're already, most schools are kind of used to it now, put it in the case, put it in your backpack, whatever. But some of our new teachers who may not have a good grasp on classroom management, if you let it go once, it's gonna be gone 15 times. So if you let one kid get away with it, 75 kids are gonna get away with it. Then you're gonna have the reputation of, well, I can use it in her classroom. Can't do it anywhere else, but wait till I get to period 3 and I'll be using it. So when we start our new teacher training and when we roll this out, we need to be sensitive to that and give them some of the strategies and the support about what it looks like. Same thing with our CSSs, because they're gonna be the ones that have to pull kids out of class when they're wilding out about it or whatever it is. So when we do it, we have to be sensitive to the people that it impacts and what that's gonna look like and how we are gonna support that before it happens, not after it happens. How are we training our CSSs before it happens? Look, y'all may be having a harder time because it's about to come through and you may have to start pulling kids out to do whatever. And then how are we training office staff? Look, your office may be packed for the first 3 weeks because kids may be in here. How are we training our counselors or our VPs who have to deal with discipline? Whatever it is, it's going to be rocky before it's smooth. So making sure everybody knows that, I think, would be a benefit, including parents.
Mhm.
You may have to come pick up Bobby. I know you're working in San Francisco, but he wilding out and threw something across the floor because we said that he can't have a cell phone or whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
I'm complete.
Yeah, yeah. Ms. Smith.
Thank you. I was also just thinking about like the campaign, once this is passed, like what is like the buzzword, right? And it's really the why behind it. We're not banning because we want to take cell phones away for the fun of it, but it's because it is a disruption to education, right? And it has an impact on students and mental health. So like, how do we like start with the why campaign? And I'm thinking about what does that look like for the community to get the community on board? And then to get everyone on board at the same time, because we don't want this to be on one person. The teachers, you need to take it. The principals, you need to enforce it, right? It has to be everyone working together. And I think the sooner that we're able to start that campaign and put it out to our sites with education to support, the better.
Are there any exceptions? What about at high school rallies where they're trying to videotape their dances? Are there any exceptions? What about at homecoming? When they're doing the parade, are there exceptions to this, or is it bell to bell, no cell phones? Because rallies most happen during the day. Some rallies happen in the evening or close to the end of the day, but what does that look like? Because if I'm a high school student and I'm a senior, and they do that, you know, when we used to do lighters, when they do the music, they hold their cell phone light up and they sway back and forth during the rally because they're dumb. But that's what they do. Like, that's their like connection to like the music or whatever. What are we doing? So I think questions like that are gonna come up and we need to be able to answer them. What are we doing after, we said bell to bell, so that won't impact prom, it won't impact like the homecoming dance, but it does impact some of the activities that they do during the school day. So what does it look like?
I think that like, we have 6 months to create the FAQs, to create like what would it look like at my school, right? I think the most important communications are gonna be the communications that happen at the school site, right? And I think that our role is gonna be to support set administrators and their teams and creating that and having that consistent messaging. I like the idea of creating a why campaign. I think that makes total sense. I think that like being really clear about the discipline piece is important. So I can imagine this is gonna be, I mean, when I've talked to teachers, they say, when I implement a policy on cell phones in my classroom, it is sometimes the hardest thing to talk about with a student, right? So giving also teachers and administrators the tools. I think a lot of people think that by us passing this policy, that someone else is going to take care of the issue for them, right? Teachers think that the administrators are gonna take care of it.
Right.
The administrators think that the teachers or central people are gonna take care of it, right? Et cetera. But like the reality is that it's gonna be on everybody. So it has to be communicated specifically, what are the expectations? And that's why we have, 6 months to do that. But I think that it starts as soon as we put this to the public, right? And it goes to the full board. Ms. Acosta-Nebraska.
I think as we think about the rollout, we also want to think about clear and consistent signage. Sometimes when you're engaging in a conversation, giving your cell phone, it's a battle, but if I just point to it, it's like a silent, like, you didn't draw attention to me, let me put it away. So I think that should be part of our implementation plan, just to assist
I like that.
adults in helping students. And then modeling, right? If we're saying this to our students, then we're not preventing our adults from using their cell phone, but we should also name that we need to be modeling during instructional time that we're not using our devices as well. I have 2 cell phones right next to me.
And we also need to be able to believe our kids.
Yeah.
So when a kid says something, we need to, because now they can just say it's on video, here it is. This did happen. The teacher did say this, or this kid did do this, or this did happen. It creates a conversation that we have to have higher levels of investigation. Because if they don't have their cell phone, they don't have this has become a third eye for people now. Like, look, see, it's videotaped or whatever. So there are these conversations that we have to have now with, well, let me really talk to you. So make sure that I are having a thorough investigation, because I don't just have video that I can pull up from the classroom or from, no, this, see, I told you they hit me first. It's on video. So I think that rollout is important. I think that signage is important, and I think that training is important, and I think that, again, it's gonna be rocky before it gets smooth. Because we're gonna have a lot of like hiccups that we're gonna have to get through, but I think
Mhm.
everybody has to buy in or not at all. If it's not everybody in, then.
We were very encouraged yesterday in the principal meeting. LaShante leads a community of practice around school climate, and specifically, we've been looking at disproportionality. We did take a few minutes at the end to say, we're hearing from you guys that you're aware these policies are coming and you're hungry for more information. Please know you're not behind, right? This is still at a governance level, and there's thought around doing this in a timeline so that we can work with you in this space throughout the spring on the rollout. And it was very well received. You know, there is more anxiety in high school because the battle's a little bit different, but there was not pushback. They deeply understand the why. In fact, there were principals already sending me research that they recommend we use in the communication and education campaign. My winter break reading list grew. But it was people at their fingertips had things that they were excited to be in partnership with.
Thank you for that. Okay. Well, sounds like we're all in agreement. So, my recommendation actually is that we bring this resolution to the first meeting in January. I think because it has to be accompanied, resolutions are usually straightforward vote at the beginning, but I think that it has to be accompanied maybe by a short slideshow of the why. And then maybe that answers a couple of the questions that families might have, right? And maybe the rest of the board. We've been discussing it for months. Some of the other board members are gonna be the first time that they're really getting to it. And since we'll be voting on it, no, because we would be voting a resolution we just vote for. So I think that they have to get the full picture to know that, like, no, we've been really thoughtful about this. So that would be my suggestion, that we put on the first meeting in January. Is that okay with everybody? Are you okay with that?
Oh, I clicked it.
Okay. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, awesome, wonderful. Okay, well then let's move to the next one. So the Student Bill of Rights, this is an item that student trustee Espinosa Junior asked for. So since he's not here, I suggest that we postpone it to the meeting in January.
To hear from him.
To hear from him, because really we're putting it here for him. I know there are a couple examples that were attached on the agenda. But I mean, I can't speak of the why. I think it's him that needs to do that. So are we okay if we postpone it? Everybody's like, oh, we're gonna get out early. Just hold on. Just. Okay, well then let's move to the next one. So,
I do have a question.
oh, sure.
With the Student Bill of Rights, is this something that they're willing to bring in their report to us? You know how the student trustees are supposed to do a report to us on the board? Is this something that we would want him to bring in that space also? Not just in governance, but bring the why or what they're thinking? Did it come from All Student Congress, whatever it is? Because they haven't given us a report yet.
We could ask him.
So could we ask that this be part of whatever report that they give us is the Student Bill of Rights? Tell us what you want, tell us what it means. So, is that okay? All right. I'm complete.
Sure. Yeah. Although, the first meeting in January is their last meeting.
Wah, wah, wah. So,
We'll see. Well, it's the last minute because we get new trustees, right? It's for the second meeting in January. Okay, well then let's move to the next policy. I agree though. Okay, so the title is deceiving, new policy on lies at schools. So the reason why we had an interest in bringing this forward is because of the change in recommendations around this from CDPH. We are currently following CDPH guidelines on anything that's health related, state and county. And their new recommendations of the school year is if a student has lice, really hand and foot, pink eye, they're not sent home. And they should not miss any school. Now, I have a really ridiculous fear of lice, which I'm gonna just openly say here. When my students in my classroom got lice, I missed work for a couple of days.
as you should.
I'm just one of those people. So I have a bias on wanting to
Place your name in it.
thank you, putting this forward. The reason why I want to do it is because I do want us to have a policy on lice. I'm hearing it's already an issue at schools. I've heard from 3 different schools where they had issues of students in the classroom with lice. The parents refused to pick them up. I don't know how parents know of the change of recommendation. I didn't even know until it actually was happening in our schools. Because I don't think that we also sent the communication to anyone. So I think that some sites were also surprised. Maybe site administrators knew, but definitely I think teachers were surprised about it. I think that there are, and I think Mr. Booker, you're gonna talk about this in a minute. I think there are good reasons why CDPH put this forward, sharing that they believe students should not be missing school over something like lice. And I think Mr. Booker will explain maybe a little bit of the why. I do think it's a disruption for both the student and the rest of the classroom. But I have a bias, so I wanted to bring it forward to hear from everyone. I think that it's a bigger issue just around the new recommendations from CDPH around some other issues, like hand and foot and pink eye, all physically transmitted. Lice is not a disease.
It is not a.
So I almost said it, although it should be, but you'll know what I mean. So I'll pass it on to Mr. Booker. I just wanted to explain the why we're even talking about it.
Thank you for allowing me to talk about this. We currently have a policy in place, a board policy that was adopted in 2008. And in our board policy, and I'll go to it. In our board policy, specifically in paragraph number 3, it talks about if student is found with active adult head lice, he or she shall be excluded from attendance. And then it talks about parents should be notified And the students shall be allowed to return to school the next day, but be checked by, some, nurse or healthcare professional. The CDPH, however, has given this guidance that says exactly the opposite.
Mhm.
And they're saying that it is not recommended that children should not be excluded from the classroom based on the findings of head lice or gnats. And so what they're saying is not only is it disruptive to their attendance, their overall attendance, but it's also disruptive to their well-being because of the stigmatism of having head lice and gnats. And that's why the CDPH has also recommended that the communication, if it's put out, it be general in nature and not specific to the classroom. And also it's notification to the parents at the end of the day, not during the time that the person is in class. And that student should not be excluded from that class at any point in time. At the end of the day, when you talk to the parents, they pick the parent up, you send them treatment options home with them. If they are unwilling or unable to do it, you still have to allow that young person to come back to school. But you can, at that point, contact a healthcare provider and take a multi-pronged approach in terms of getting them some supports.
Mhm.
And that's what the CDPH is recommending.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. So let's open it up for discussion. I think that we have a couple problems. One, we have two policies that conflict with each other. We have a policy that says that we'll follow the guidance from CDPH.
Yes.
And then we have a policy specifically on lice treatment that's saying the opposite. So right now we're going with the first policy around following CDPH guidelines.
That is correct.
So if we want to sustain that idea, then we got to change our policy on lice, either eliminate it or change it. If we don't want to go with CDPH guideline, then we have to edit our lice policy, specific calling out why we are going surpassing, I don't know what the word is, violating the recommendation. That's not the right word, but
Yeah, and just to correct you a little bit.
Thank you.
Is that the guidance that we use for health issues we're following local and state guidance. And so that would be the Contra Costa Public Health as well as the California Department of Public Health.
Mhm.
And so we are following those two guidance. They basically say the same thing. Pretty much all local health agencies are under the umbrella of CDPH. And so we want to stick with that, which makes our policy out of compliance. And so if we are to move forward, we would want that policy to be, the head lice policy to be in compliance with what is currently in place with the CDPH, as well as the Contra Costa County Public Health.
thank you for that. So what I'm hearing you say is that your recommendation is that we sustain the recommendation from local or state.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts?
Gross.
Do you have any further thoughts?
Like, I think one of the things is I get that they don't want to have a stigma or that, but as a teacher, have some stuff popping off in your head. I'm gonna put you all the way over there anyway, because I don't want them jumping on my carpet, jumping on another student, jumping from however it happens. The best part of me and the most humane part of me is still, there's one kid and there's 22 other kids. Pink eye, lice, head, foot, mouth, all of that, chicken pox, all of that stuff happens. But go home. Go take care of it and come back. We gonna still love you and embrace you. We know stuff happens, but to have to sit there to the end of the day, if I was a kindergarten parent and I know that you made my kid sit in the classroom with Billy that has something that's contagious and something that could do it, I would be mad. To the end of the day, my first thing is, why didn't you call me? why didn't you let me know? They used to send letters home. Remember every like, someone in this, and it was general, someone in this class has lice, please check your child and make sure that they don't have it. They don't send letters home anymore. Like, we don't get anything anymore. So I truly understand what the state is saying and what CDPH is saying, and we don't want to harm children's mental well-being and isolate them and all of that stuff. But at the same time, gross. I'm complete.
Thank you. Okay, so quite a few hands, so I'm gonna go, Mr. Booker, then Ms. Smith, Mr. Ortiz, Mr. Fleshman, and then Ms. Acosta-Velasquez.
And I completely understand, your point of view. The guidance says that they recommend that they not be excluded from class. It doesn't mean that it's kind of contradictory in the sense that if you isolate somebody, they're still isolated. So it's saying that they shouldn't be removed from the class, and it is the discretion of the district to provide notification. And so we have done it in the past. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Fleischman, we, if the nurses are involved, do make notifications, but it's general in nature.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
So, two things that came to mind. One is I was looking at the CDC website and they emphasize the point of if a child has head lice, they do not need to leave school early. Once they start treatment at home, they can return to school. And so, if we are going with, guidelines, there needs to be something in there around like parent education and giving them the resources of over-the-counter medication, over-the-counter treatments that they can start, right? And like having that handy. And I do think we should go back to sending notifications so that it doesn't spread. And it spreads they don't jump. I learned a lot about lice, let me tell you.
What do? They just move? Like,
No, so sharing brushes, like sleeping in the same area, you can share a pillow, you can wear a hat. Yeah, and then I also learned, and I was ignorant to this fact at first because I was taught that African American people.
I was about
did
to ask
not
it, do we get
lice.
it, friend?
My daughter, in fact, got lice, and I didn't think it was a thing because I was taught
That we don't get lice
So-
because they have the grease, like the oil.
Exactly. If you keep your oil in your hair, you don't get lice. So everyone can get it.
We don't.
And then that's how
We can't catch a break.
sorry, I went off a tangent, but I wanted to say like a policy, yes, but emphasizing resources and starting treatment at home because we don't want it to turn into a situation of neglect where
Yeah.
students are just coming and not getting treatment.
Yeah.
And then also bringing back the notification so that parents are aware because kids touch a lot and share items, especially in the younger years.
And that is also part of the guidance from CDPH.
Okay.
And basically with lice, they don't jump, but they do feed off their hair and blood.
Ugh.
And so if you're using, like, what Shante said, if you're using somebody's brush or sleeping in somebody's pillow, could become an issue.
They can live in teddy bears and stuffed animals and
So all the stuff that's in our elementary school classroom, can they live in the rug?
I don't know.
Yes, for a short period
I
of
was
time.
gonna say, they don't survive, but
Yeah.
they can.
Burn my classroom.
they have
Okay,
to-
let's move to, let's move to, Mr. Ortiz. Mr. Ortiz, Mr. Fleshman, Mr. Acosta-Velasquez, myself, and I think I saw Miss, oh yeah, of course,
All right, thank you. So, when did the district stop sending out letters?
this year,
This year? Okay.
right? This year specifically. I think it was last year.
Last year too.
too?
It was last year too.
But I think last year that we were still sending kids home, right? But not the letters. We were sending kids, but sorry.
It wasn't consistent. Last year, no letters, kids still got sent home at some sites, but
So it was just inconsistent.
it was just inconsistent.
Okay.
Clarity, the policy changed in 2016.
Oh, geez.
And so in 2016, we were supposed to stop inclusion. But I understand some sites just didn't.
Yeah. Wow.
And I'm sorry, not to interrupt you.
Okay.
Dr. Moses, but the policy change internally. The board policy has stayed.
Hasn't changed.
Okay.
But then we passed the CDPH guideline piece specifically around COVID, right? That's when we became really
That is correct.
thoughtful about any recommendation. That's what we're gonna follow, right? So it's really just more in the recent years.
I remember this vividly because I was at a site where we continually had issues with lice when this policy was changed. So CDPH, or maybe not CDPH, but county guidance changed in 2016, which
Yes.
caused our special education department, the nurses, to change our guidance in the district. But the board policy was never changed.
Hmm.
And the notices weren't pulled off the website
Mm-hmm.
at
Got
that
it.
time.
I don't think that answered your question, but
Oh, sorry.
I think, no, you're fine, but I think that now district-wide, where it's like actually in effect, is really this year where like everybody's aware that we're not supposed to be doing this. At least the principals, right?
Mhm.
So no letters home and we're not sending students home. Is there any other form of communication that is going out to families in case if there's an exposure?
Currently, no. But my recommendation would be to send out communication in a general form. And then actually send the information to LaShante's point, sending the information to the parents where they have treatment options and educating them on what head lice actually is, because people don't truly know, and they
Mhm.
assume that they jump around, they live forever, and that's not the case.
I completely assumed that. And I assumed that I couldn't get it because I was Black. Like I'm going through like 47 years of mind blown that they don't jump and they don't, Black people can get it.
Mr. Fleshman?
So this, I'm gonna be as brief as I can, but there's some of this is personal. I have a nephew who, when he was 13, had really long, beautiful locks. And in a family that believed that Black people couldn't get lice, there was no education. Mom didn't know, nobody knew what to do, right? He got lice. She was advised to put kerosene in his hair.
Ooh.
The pilot light jumped across the kitchen and burned the overwhelming majority of his body. He is now about, I think he's 32, he's a very successful actor and rapper, and he's an amazing human being. But I sat with him in Shriners Hospital in Sacramento for months, and it was the worst experience of my life. So I say this to say that we are an educational institution, and that happened because of a lack of education. And with all due respect to what you both have stated, and I don't mean to contradict you in a public forum,
You
But
can
it-
always contradict us.
it behooves us as an educational institution to make science-based decisions and to educate our community on what this really is and what it is not, and what to do when it comes up. Because this is not the first family that was told put kerosene in the baby's hair, because that's what killed the life. Because it's such a all of us here have been miseducated about what lice is and what it is not. And it's our responsibility to educate our community, including our educators, teachers, families, etc., to know that it's a very difficult thing to deal with when it happens. It's not, and I don't know all of the details about the long-term impact, but I believe, Mr. Booker, you could share more about that, but I don't believe that there's a real significant long-term health concern here. But the ostracization and the mistreatment and
That is long-term.
those things are long-term. And so I'm complete. I think it's very important that like I said, I kept talking. We really need to have a science-based approach to this, and we need to educate our community to dispel those myths, so that those type of things don't happen again.
Thank you. Phil.
And if I can just speak.
And hold on a second, Mr. Booker, I just want to say, if any staff ever wants to contradict us, you're welcome to do so, please. Does not mean I'm gonna agree with you, but you're welcome to do it, so please feel free to always speak your mind, especially in committee setting. I don't know about board meeting, but in committee setting. You're welcome to do it, so, but thank you for sharing. Sorry, Mr. Booker, just wanted to clear.
I just want to belabor the point of what LaShante was talking about earlier. It's about the information and education. I mean, and that's not just with this. It's getting that information out and then educating folks to the fact, and that's everybody. That's not just families, that's labor partners, that's the staff, that's cabinet, and making sure that they have a complete understanding, because that's when we have issues, is when we don't educate folks to the information that we're putting out. We put out a lot of information, but not a lot of education with regard to that. So I think it's important for us to, and that's the pre part. getting people to understand before, you know, you actually start taking part in the actual policy itself.
And there's also the financial aspect too, though, right? So, sorry, but there's a financial aspect too, because getting the products to get rid of lice does cost money. So having a kid that's sitting in the classroom and it could here wear my hat and now it's jumped. So now two people have to pay for the treatment. And then, no, now you get to use my comb. Now we're at three people. So there, to your point, there is an education fact about it. But it's also, we can't be light on the fact that it's a financial burden. And some people rather just sit you back in the classroom, to your point, where neglect comes in, because I don't have the money to pay for the treatment. So how are we as a district making that accessible? Do we have if you need, we will make this available for you, part of the financial aspect of making this policy stick? Because we have to think, to your point, all the way around, and the impact on every level. So yes, education, yes, understanding, but yes, what if I don't have? Are you now gonna call CPS on me because my kid is sat in the classroom for 4 days with lice and you're gonna call it neglect? I didn't have money to get rid of it. What does that look like? And how are we educating teachers about that's not a reason to call CPS? That's a reason to send them to the office and get one of the free kits that we have available, or a voucher to CVS, or whatever it is. We have to be forward thinking as well, while we dispel some of the myths and misunderstandings that we grew up with. I'm complete.
Okay, everybody, we're all jumping in. Let's try not to jump in a large discussion, just because there's a lot of people waiting. Not because of you.
No, it's just because-
You, Mr. Booker, and I did. You, Mr. Booker, and I did it, so I'm calling the three of us out. Mr. Customer Preskis.
So I firmly agree with Guthrie. I think that science needs to be what we really focus on, and we set a dangerous precedent when we go against CDPH guidelines. And so I don't think any of our policies should work against that. I think about other contagious things that happen in school, like hand, foot, and mouth, and ringworm, and so that should be consistent. And being a site principal who had hundreds of cases every single year, unfortunately, I think about the students whom were most affected by this, and it was our most marginalized students that already missed too much school. And so communication, at least in Long Province, still happened as of last year. But I agree that we have a responsibility to share in general. And, you know, my son got it in school as well here in West Contra Costa, and mayonnaise was the most effective strategy. And so I think having a one pager that has not only strategies that work, but resources, right? Where folks can go when they are, and maybe even having donations made to our school sites that we know needed, so that families aren't burdened financially. They are very incredibly hard to get rid of once you get them, because, you know, they live in your clothes in your home. And so once it is in the home, it's hard. And so I think making sure that we're not impacting student achievement to our students who do have it is very important.
So I'll say a couple things. I mean, I agree with everything you've all said, even with my own bias on lies. But I will say this. I think that watching students who have had lice, a lot of the time, I don't think they're concentrating on learning. They're concentrating on what they have, if they know what they have. A lot of the time they do. Two, I think that other kids notice, and I think that also creates a stigma and makes it worse. And even if the teacher was to step up and try to educate the classroom, they're still kids, and we all know how difficult that is. I also think that we're gonna have a hard time educating the whole district on why lice is not something to be worried about, because a lot of people actually feel exactly how I do about lice, right? And honestly, I'll tell you all, if I was a teacher and I have kids that have lice in my classroom, I will miss work the next day. I hate to say it, but I think that's the reality that we got to put on the table. We can't also be unrealistic that an entity or politician creates a policy that affects the whole state or nation, which is based, I think, on good, but that affects the system in a way that they don't understand, also creates hardship. And I think that what's happening right now is that kids are getting lice. Teachers are trying to send them to school, to home. That's not happening. Now the kid is being affected because they know they have lice. The class knows they have lice. They're being put in the corner for the rest of the day. Then the poor kid is suffering in the corner of the room. The teacher wants to have no interaction with the kid. No other kid wants to have any interaction, right? And potentially, if it's not caught, then, kids will be kids and they play. It could spread, right? Not by jumping, but by rubbing heads, right? So I think that I just want to be realistic on what's actually happening today in our schools. And we know how difficult a system like ours is to change and educate. And I don't think it's gonna happen within a year, right? So I just want to put it out there, because I think that that's my worry. It's like, could we potentially temporarily put something in place where we're being realistic, but long-term, we're moving into what's being recommended by
CDPH.
Thank you so much. That's what I'm wondering. Okay, Dr. Moses, then I have, I think it's Mr. Spinoza. Gosh, I put acronyms for everybody and now I'm starting to, then it's you, LS, and then, I don't have Mr. Mitchell.
That's fine.
Okay, Dr. Moses.
So, couple things. First, I just want to announce this, that in elementary schools, it's the principal who screens heads for life.
Why I would never be a principal? That's the reason.
And if you've been an elementary principal for a long enough time, you will see this frequently. So I also understand the policy, right? I had a kid who missed months of school because of lice, and that wasn't okay either. And it wasn't that the parent wasn't trying, but all of what I've heard tonight is true. One, it's a confidentiality aspect, right? One of the ways I looked up other policies, one of the things that San Ramon Valley Unified does is they send an email to parents so that they can keep confidentiality, and the email says your child was detected to have lice, here's how you get rid of it, and also a conference with the parent. So I think we should look at solutions like that. The other thing is classroom mitigations. We did have lice spreading in one of my schools. Like one kid would get it and then 5 kids would get it. And we were like, what the heck? What we found is those classrooms had lots of things like beanbags. Kids were roughhousing on the rug. There were teddy bears in the reading corner. And so the lice wasn't being spread student to student, the lice was being spread by things. So once we realized that and started to transform what the classrooms looked like, kids started bringing their own teddy bears instead of having community teddy bears. So we have to think about classroom mitigations. The other thing is the financial barrier is real. As a principal, I used to keep at least 3 or 4 kits on hand for families that said they couldn't afford it, and I would just give it to them. So we do need to try and find a way. Those kits can be between $20 and $35. And if your kid needs a treatment 3 times a week in order to get rid of it, that's $100 that some people don't have. So we have to also look at those things, but
That's okay.
preserving, and it's not just the kid, the parents react too. When you tell them their kid has lice, they think people are judging them. So it's really difficult from an emotional standpoint to counsel families and students who've had this. In a lot of cases, we would, because teachers were like, don't send them back. If you send them back, I'm going home. So we would have a space in the classroom and a brave soul willing to provide instruction in the office, so as to also support our staff who have strong feelings about this. So I don't think it's something easy that's going to be resolved, but I think we have to hit it from all areas, starting with education. It's been difficult. It's going to continue to be difficult. But I don't like it, but I understand why the guidance has changed. And I think we just need to figure out a way to educate and support in our district.
Thank you. Mr. Espinosa?
Well, I was just going to add that our policy was implemented in 2008. CDPH's updated this information in 2024. I did research of some, districts and districts that started implementing the policy has been in 2023. So I think it's a good idea, if we start rolling out the policy with updated information, this could be something that school sites can refer to if they're getting pushback from the teachers that they don't want them in there.
Well, I don't want to go out of turn, but could I?
I mean, you're the interim super.
Having had the risk hat on, so you're right, the state just changed it, but our county changed it a long time ago.
Mm.
County guidance and state guidance is different. State guidance holds more weight than county guidance. So we followed county guidance now. There's some muscle to it. With that comes liability. Should we not change these policies, we could open ourselves to litigation on both sides. So I just wanted to name that.
For sure. Thank you for that. Mr. Mitchell, thank you.
So I just wanted to kind of put out there, you know, the way I approach my work with the representing teachers and is to try to make sure that every single teacher shows up every day to provide instruction to our students, right? And I know that this, keeping the students in the classroom in a situation where we're so severely understaffed is going to lead to even more crises. Because if one teacher, every teacher has their own class, they also have students that are split from other teachers' classes that they're also, you know, teaching during their prep and relieving that, you know, situation. Like they have all these hats on, and we throw another absence into the mix because people are going to be sensitive, like Clerk Gonzalez Hoy. That's just the reality. And we are so understaffed that I don't think we have the luxury of following every guidance as if we have teachers and subs waiting on every corner and tree to come in and help us staff our classrooms, because we don't. And I think we just really need to have that also, that reality, and maybe the intention being to modernize the policy at some point when we reach an adequate staffing level, but right now we're not there. We're in a crisis.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you for that. Well, you're next, so sure.
Yeah. Mr. Booker, are they going past lice? Are they talking about mono? Are they talking about in mono, the kissing disease? I'm from Alabama.
Yeah.
Are they talking about mono? Are they talking about head, foot, mouth? Are they talking about pink eye? Are they talking about all this stuff that goes around in elementary schools and middle schools and high schools? Like, how deep are they going? So, you know what I'm saying? Like, how far into the rabbit hole are they going? Are they just stopping at the head? Are they just stopping at lice?
Well, and I don't want to speak for CDPH, but I think it's the guidance that is most prominent at the time. And so this has become a prominent issue. So they have given direction. And to Dr. Moses's point, the county health has changed this a while ago. And then CDPH actually picked it up and put a little bit more teeth to it. Because they are the guiding umbrella. But it's based on the prominence of what the issue is.
So it's based on what's popping off at the time. And right now, lice is rampant. Rampant, look, scratch back.
Enough so where they changed the guidance.
Okay, I'm complete.
I just wanted to add, just to point out that contagions behave differently. And what they're saying about the head lice is it doesn't jump. You know, you'll get it from a thing, you don't get it if somebody touches you, right? Something like scabies. If you have scabies and you're touching people, you're gonna give them
Didn't even
scabies.
think about
Pink eye,
scabies.
if you touch your eye, you know what I mean? So I don't think that they're looking at policies that are easily transmittable. What they've determined with head lice is it's not as frequently transmitted and it's disruptive to the social, emotional, and the attendance. I agree with what everybody has said. I also want to point out that not only will teachers not show up, but when you try to split kids because you have no subs, the
They'll
other
say no.
teachers will say, I'm not taking that kid in my class because then there was a lice. So as administrators, we find ourselves covering classes or multiple classes in order not to have to burden teachers with the worry of, I'm getting these 5 kids that came from the lice classroom. So it just perpetuates in so many different ways and becomes a part of school culture, right? How do you keep your staff safe? How do you keep your students safe? What do you do within your school culture where everybody feels like you're doing everything you can to protect them from getting lice?
Mhm.
And it's not simple.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Ms. Smith?
Yeah, I was gonna point out two things. So one, the CDPH guidelines has at the bottom recommended treatment.
Mhm.
And
And
so it tells you, and then it also noted a treatment that was flammable.
Mhm.
So that was nice to, I mean, it
Mhm.
just kind of went with your point to really educate parents. And then to Catherine's point, I think there are some non-pharmaceutical things that you can do that are also highly effective. I'm just going back to the education piece though, because like even us at this table, we all had a different understanding of what lice is and isn't, right? And so just think about the community in which we serve. And then lastly, I think to county partnerships, we have health vans at our high schools that give different services. And so how are we promoting those services that parents can access free supports for this? And then I like the idea of the email, just communication, private conference with the family. This is what you can do. Let us support you in getting the resources you need to support your child.
Thank you. I'm next, but I'm gonna jump after Mr. Fleshman and after Francisco, Mr. Ortiz. So, Mr. Fleshman, go ahead.
The financial impact of having to purchase, the treatment has been brought up. I also want to lift up the financial impact of having to stay home a day or two from school. If your 4-year-old has to stay home, then you have to stay home. If your 5 or 6-year-old has to stay home, then you have to stay home. Or your 15-year-old has to miss a day at school also because they have to stay home and watch their little sibling. So that's something that is, I think, really important here as well. Also, we're talking about these items. I would imagine that community schools could support this. This is absolutely a matter of community health and really within the spirit of community schools. I'm gonna say a hard truth right now, but we're talking about the adults that work at school that are gonna be afraid to be around children. And again, we're an educational institution that needs to be science-based. And I get it, I know, understand that our generation has been raised up to believe a certain thing about lice.
I'm younger.
Um,
The board, it's really affected me.
But it is our responsibility to also make student-based decisions and to support students and to support adults to get to where they need to get to support students as well.
Thank you for that. Mr. Ortiz?
Has there been an increased prevalence of rice in the last couple of years or? Just guidance is changing and we've just been out of compliance for the past, I don't know, couple months before, whatever.
The Nurses
thought it was this year.
Association has been pushing this for a really long time, like whatever and slowly county departments of health have been supporting the guidance from the medical field. And now it's just catching on. So it's something that's probably been in the works the last 10 years or so.
Just to follow up to Zephyr's point about community schools, but potentially we could also leverage Measure X funding through the connection with John Joy's office. Because that's a public health issue. Or that's, you know, especially the educational piece that needs to be rolled out to families. Whether the emails, I'm not sure if every family has access to an email or whether parents or whatever that may be.
Really good points. Thank you for that.
Is it your turn, Fran?
It is my turn.
Before you say something.
I
know,
knew you were
knew
gonna
it.
go.
But if we're talking, because to Miss Catherine's point, it's not just the product to clean the hair. It's the laundry detergent to wash the bed sheets in the house and to wash the clothes and to wash everything. So when we talk about financial and how community schools can help or John Joyer's office can help or whatever, it's also understanding that some families don't have a washer and dryer in the house. Then it's going to the laundromat and making the time to go to the laundromat and having the money to go to the laundromat. So it's such a complex issue that dives into the finances also. But to Guthrie's point, if I'm a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 15-year-old in the house, and a 14-year-old in the house, we just crossed 3 areas of our school: elementary, middle, and high school. So then now what does that look like? Because I gotta wash everybody's head in this one product. So now, to your point, Dr. Moses, I'm over $100 that I have to spend, including washing, including or sending them to school. And then having my 15-year-old humiliated or targeted in some way, or my 14-year-old who's middle school, which we know middle school is ruthless. So it's such a, I guess it is about education and it's about relearning, but it's not gonna be easy. Whatever we decide to do, it's gonna have to take a lot of work doing it. I'm complete.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so kind of a little bit of summarizing. So I agree, first of all, I don't think that we should out loud say we're going against GPH, right? I mean, I think that we have to follow the recommendation from them, and we gotta continue to do so. As been mentioned a few times, right? We gotta follow the science, we gotta follow the expertise. I like the idea of the communication that Ms. Smith and Mr. Booker talked about. I like the piece about finding financial support from whichever source to support families with treatment and testing. And then definitely agree with, the piece about lack of education in all levels. Absolutely, we gotta do that. So I think that I would like for a policy to come back from staff, a draft that incorporates all of that edits the one that we passed in 2016. And with that said, my question to the group is, what do we do? Oh, sorry, one thing that I think that needs to be added is guidance for the different levels of, I guess that would be part of the AR, I don't know, but guidance on the different levels from like the teacher to the administrator about what do we do if you encounter lies in your classroom? And these are the steps you should follow. I think that needs to be clear. And I think that's something that's missing right now. But what do we do in the meantime? Like, I don't want to also be unrealistic, that even though I think even I agree, long-term, this is what has to happen. What's actually currently happening is not supporting the reason why this is even happening. Does that make sense? It's actually still creating stigma. It's actually making it worse because now the teacher and potentially administrator are upset that we can't send the kids home. And then it's become more public because now everybody in the classroom knows that the kid has lies. Anyways, I don't want to repeat what we said earlier, but what are we going to do in the meantime to support our schools with what's currently happening? And I do want to point out, I think that, like, I agree with Mr. Fleischman, this is in a way an adult problem, but we also can't turn a blind eye on what Mr. Mitchell said, right? I mean, the reality is that our system's hurting in HR issues right now more than many things. And I do think that I don't like to do this in public settings, but as stupid as maybe my view is and my bias is, and saying that I would miss work, that it's, again, things that I've heard from many, including administrators, if I'm gonna put it out there. I'm not coming over to your house, Mr. Constable, anytime soon, or Miss Smith.
That's a hot mess.
So what are we gonna do temporarily? I guess we have kind of like our plan long-term, but what do we do right now that this is happening and there's no guidance in our schools? Ms. Smith?
I just had a question. Currently, because I don't know the answer. Currently, if there is a certain number of students who have lice in one classroom, one isolated space, that we could then call like, hey, this is kind of like a repeated exposure, like this is very contagious, right? Do we do any type of special cleaning for that specific classroom? to think about stopping the spread.
I think that's a labor issue too, because our custodial staff has a certain amount of time that they spend in each classroom and each thing. If I got to deep clean a classroom, I think we saw that in COVID too, right? If I got to deep clean a classroom, what does that do then to my schedule? Or do teachers have to get rid of a carpet and then who's gonna replace it? Do they have to get rid of the dolls or whatever it is, or the stuffies, and then who replaces it? So I don't know, if 15 kids out of 20 have lice, do we shut the classroom down? Do we, like what? So I don't know.
Well, I thought of this when Dr. Moses said, like, she had a classroom and it went from 1 kid to 5 kids to several kids, and it took a while to get that out because of it being in these various products. So I wonder, is there a certain number or I just wonder, is there something else that we can do on our end if we know that some families don't have the resources to?
I'm gonna let Dr. Moses speak.
Yeah, just want to speak to the experience that I was alluding to. So one kid, in this particular situation, one kid had repeated lice across the year,
Oh, okay.
right?
Mhm.
So it isn't that on Wednesday, we found 5 kids with
Got
lice. No, we have found one and then we found another, and then a couple weeks later, there might be another. So it's also something that's it spreads over time. In relation to the things that could potentially be adding to the spread, we just throw it all out. So if there is a class that's impacted, and this is really hard for some of our educators, but we have to say, sorry, your reading corner is gonna consist of just chairs.
Okay.
No bean bags, no stuffies, no, but I've never had a case where the custodians came in to clean. I mean, we would take our Clorox wipes. But also, if we did a little research, we'll find that lice doesn't live for very long if it doesn't have something to attach to.
Right, the
So,
blood right there.
yeah, if it doesn't have
Mhm.
something to attach to, it's gonna
Right.
kill itself off.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
And the recommendation from CDPH is that regular cleaning will, rectify the problem. Because lice doesn't live long outside of, the body or on the body.
Right, it has to have a host. I remember.
I think half of us are itchy.
Yeah.
I'm Googling.
On our nurse's site, and lots of information, and it's always lived there, but I don't know that.
I
people
think
know that.
it's, Clerk Gonzalez, I think what you asked, the question that you asked about what can we do in the interim? I think it's some of those easy
No,
lifts,
I-
like there are some easy lifts that we talked about. Switching to email notification is an easy lift,
I love that.
making sure that we're looking for the financial backing to be able to help families is an easy lift. I think that education, like assemblies or sending a parent square note or whatever it is that principals can do is an easy lift. Like, I think it's some things that are easy lifts, having the conversation within UTR is a lift, right? Educating all of our community about what it is and what it's not, with a campaign about, watch out, Black people, they don't jump, whatever the campaign title is, which a great title. So whatever we do, I think those are easy lifts, right? So I think that we should do the easy stuff on there for sure, and then we need to wait for staff to bring us back the policy and then get it as uncomfortable as it's going to make you and I. And we may not go back to site visits, but we need to probably get it rolling. I'm complete.
That sounds good. Okay, well then why don't we do this? Why don't we ask staff to look at the 2016 policy and then bring us a draft. And then in the meantime, if staff could think about like, what are we telling administrators? What should we be telling teachers and parents? So I'm also assuming that this policy will take a little bit of time. So, I don't want it to also continue months and months of miscommunication at the sites and inconsistencies about what to do. Mr. Booker?
I just, for clarity, so you're saying the policy, the board policy, which was adopted in 2008, and then we have an AR that was.
Oh, is that
put out in
the AR?
2016.
The 2016 lice policy, is that the
That's the,
AR?
yeah, that's the AR.
Okay. Okay, actually, I would like to see both.
Mhm.
So, I mean, not that it matters, but I think that we have to see the AR to be able to be comfortable with the policy changes, right?
Mhm.
I mean, the policy changes is just like practically following the recommendation from CAPH, but
Mhm.
we really want to have the conversation around the AR, right?
Yep.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Is that okay?
Uh-huh, absolutely, sorry.
No, you're fine. Any, you're like, watch out for the headlights.
I know.
Any last thoughts from anybody? I just appreciate everybody's conversation.
The
It was
vulnerability.
good. Yes, absolutely. That was really great. We all had very different perspectives. Okay, well. I'm gonna go shower. Well, we have one last policy. We have 15 minutes. Which is, we're revisiting this conversation, which we had, I think maybe in October. When we were discussing when the state gives us COLA, how that should be distributed, and we didn't continue that conversation. Do you think we can discuss it in 10 minutes?
We can start.
Okay, I do want us to end on time, so wherever we are at 7, we'll just continue the conversation at the next meeting.
Okay.
So, did you have any thoughts to get us started? Or did you want me to just like?
Can you start?
Sure, okay, so the intent was that, I think everybody in this room knows we're having difficulty, obviously, recruiting and retaining, in part because of competing salaries around us.
Mhm.
Especially for classified and teachers, we have a recruitment problem. Right now, we have 80 teacher openings,
Mhm.
200 and something classified openings. As thought, as part of the remedy would be that an easy lift, easy, well, after our last conversation, not so easy, but an easy lift would be that maybe wouldn't affect our budget, but now I understand multi-year projections a little more.
Mhm.
Would be that the COLA that the state gives us every year, whatever that looks like, would be put a percentage into salary and benefits for our employees. Let's say that a 2% increase in COLA is given to us next year by the state, which I'm not too far off. I think it's 2.9 next year or 2.5, I can't remember.
2.08 maybe.
Okay, then 80% or 70% of that would go to salaries and benefits, the rest would go to district expenses. Right now, COLA goes into our general fund, and then we obviously use our general fund for everything, right? So, and then labor negotiates with us, and then we come to an agreement potentially on increases. This would just be automatic, as a starting point. Our last meeting, we discussed that unfortunately, the budget office already takes in consideration COLA for the out years,
Mhm.
in their multi-year projections. So it's not just something that next year we could just like transfer. We would have to actually cut it from our budget in order to put it into salary and benefits. So right now just budgeted for the general fund. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we never really finished the discussion around that or continued it. So I'll pass it on to Dr. Moses. Continue.
Okay, last time we met about this, I expressed some concerns. I just happen to have the executive summary from the first interim that we're gonna present next week that actually outlines the concerns pretty clearly. So I just want to start there. So I'm sharing screen if you're on Zoom. We were projected to have a COLA of, I don't remember, but I'm gonna say approximately 3%, but due to the issues within the state, that COLA was decreased all the way down to 1.07% for 24-25 school year. Now, under this policy, we would have then used that 1.07 to increase salaries. However, if you look at this illustration that I'm sharing here, what you'll see is that for 23-24, our unaudited actual shows that our LCFF revenue was $344.9 million, okay? Our current revenue, even with the 1.07 COLA, is only 337 million not only, but it's $337.7 million, which actually is a negative COLA. We have a negative 2.10 difference in the revenues we had for last year and the revenues we had for this year, even though we increased by 1.07 COLA. What I was trying to demonstrate previously and what I'm demonstrating now is when we make a decision ahead of time to give away what we perceive as an increase in revenue, it will absolutely negatively impact our revenue picture without understanding whether we're going to net more money or not. Things that are included in that picture are the obvious things that we know our funding depends on. It depends on enrollment, it depends on ADA, depends on many different factors. But when we expect for COLA to actually be an increase to our bottom line, that isn't always our reality. For that reason, I suggested that we not opposed to making sure that if we do have extra revenue, it goes to our staff. I think competitive compensation is important, but I also think that fiscal solvency is even more important, especially in this given time. And so we need to look at a fair share formula to ensure that we have a true picture of the COLA and not just the predictions of what we think we may net from COLAs that are offered to school districts in productive years. And I'll stop there.
Let me ask a question though.
Okay.
Could we potentially then, instead of implementing a policy where we're giving 70% of new COLA to our labor units and salary and benefits in our current budget, could we potentially start it in the 28-29 school year where that has not already been budgeted in a multi-year, and it wouldn't affect our budget picture because it would be, you know, it hasn't been taken into consideration.
So we already have a natural increase in stepping column. Stepping column is already increasing salaries year over year by about an average of about 1.5%. So we hope to get at least 1.5% in COLA just to keep up with what we already know we're going to pay out in stepping column. So I'm still really nervous about committing to anything other than the stepping column that we've already committed to, because as you can see, what we netted last year did not even cover stepping column. So I think it's the same issue, like committing to contributing money, a percentage of a COLA that we think may make us better off is dangerous when, if we were to use our previous 5 years as an example, we aren't really netting what we expect from these COLAs that we get because we're in declining enrollment and our ADA isn't recovered yet from COVID. So I'd like to say yes, but you know, having had the CBO hat on for the past year and a half, saying yes is very risky, given that we're already in a situation where we're trying to address the structural deficit. If we didn't have a structural deficit and we were in a position where we weren't allocating every penny each year, then I'd feel better. But I just don't see an avenue to that in this moment. Not if we want to continue to positively address the structural deficit and get to where we're not worried at every interim about what our financial picture is going to look like.
Okay.
Right
you.
now, 28 and 29 don't look good either.
Okay. All right. Do you have anything to?
This one I need to process a little bit more because I'm getting more and more information. But I also want us to be in a position at some point to where we're doing the both and. When we are financially in a position to where blah, 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 we are making it a priority that compensation is a necessity. because it's going to yield the results of teachers in the classroom. And we're going to become an attractive district. So what does it look like to become an attractive district and defining that and then moving in that direction? An attractive district has qualified teachers in the classroom. An attractive district has facilities that are up to standard. Attractive district has, I think that we are all wanting that. And then how do we get there without cutting our legs off at the same time, right? So how are we moving in that direction? But I think it has to be a real honest conversation. When we hit these markers, then what we are going to do is this triggers this, right? So positive certification, having money in our, whatever it is, and having the code, all of this triggers, this means that we can start talking about compensation and really put that as the thing that drives us forward. I say all of that to say that this one I want to think about more and really have some time to do what we need to do and not hurt us at the same time. Because we need to compensate. We have to have living wages. We have to have all of those things that just make us humanitarian. And at the same time, we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I'm complete.
Anyone else?
Okay, Mr. Ortiz,
Put me on there
and
after.
Mr.
I'm gonna-
Mitchell.
I want a rebuttal, no.
So, Mr. Ortiz, Mr. Mitchell, Dr. Moses?
Okay, that sounds good.
All right,
I'll
thank
write
you.
it
So, in the figure, thank you, Dr. Moses, for what you shared. So in those first interim projections for 24-25, those are the projections, right? Not comparison to the actuals. So,
That's what, at the first interim, we check our numbers. We actually increased by about $100,000, but our prediction was pretty spot on. So we know what we're going to collect for LCFF, because our numbers have now been solidly reported. So it's not a prediction like it would be for next year. It's more of a solid number that we can count on for this year.
so the 337 is something that we can count on in the, unaudited actual will be shared in what, September?
September of next year. Yeah. We believe we're pretty spot on, because we make the prediction when we adopt the budget and then we check the numbers. I don't remember what our first cutoff date, but we have 3 cutoff dates throughout the year where we check our numbers to see how close our predictions were. And we were pretty spot on. I'll be sharing that with you next week.
And then just as a follow-up, in the step and column conversation, we have about 10 to 12 or so of those steps, which are like dead ears. Right, so we have about 60% of our educators in our district who are in their first 10 years. Right, and then we have about 40% of those folks are in their first 5 years.
Yes.
And so a lot of the folks who are within are within the way bottom of that pay scale. And so as we're trying to recruit and retain people in our district, this has to be an important conversation to really put out to the forefront. Otherwise, we're not going to have enough people actually come and work in our district. Even those who live in the community who are being pushed out, who are going to a neighboring district for better compensation when they continue to frame us as a training district. We don't want to be a training district.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell?
So first, I just want to say that, United Teachers of Richmond didn't ask for this policy. This was an idea from the board that came before, you guys in this committee. But what United Teachers of Richmond does advocate for is a prioritization of the classroom, right? And so this could be a mechanism to do that. There's other ways to do that, right? One of the metrics that we look at that is extremely concerning is since 2019 to now, the revenue to the district has gone up 40%. Increases to bargaining unit salaries has gone up 16% at the same period. The more money the district gets, the less it invests in the classroom. So in 2019, the investment in classroom education was in bargaining unit salaries was 35% of total outgo. Today it's 29% and falling. So the more money the district gets, the less it spends on teachers in the classroom. For 4 years running, the district hasn't invested the minimum required by law in classroom compensation, and that's 55% of total outgo. This year it was over $11 million short, again, for the 4th year in a row. So revenue is a piece of it, but prioritization of what happens to those dollars once they get here is perhaps an even bigger piece of it. Because every district next to us is in the same state with the same laws, with many of the same types of students, with the same, expectations, graduation requirements, A through G. And this is the district that is in the biggest crisis or alleged biggest crisis. And we don't agree that there is a structural deficit because every year we have more money. Every year Fund 17 goes up, it doesn't go down. The structural deficit is based on projections. Those projections are always wrong. This year, we were off by $50 million. We received $50 million in additional revenue based compared to what the district projected. And that's happened every year, at least for the last 4 years. We went back and did it, an average of 14% under projection of revenue every single year. So if that's true this year, we can expect an additional $67 million in revenue to come in this year. That's not in the $337 million figure that Dr. Moses cited, because LCFF, of course, is just a piece of the revenue the district receives. There's a lot of things that go into all the money the district has. So maybe looking at a percent of total outgo going to teachers is another way to look at this. The state average for a district our size between 20 and 30,000 ADA is 35% of total outgo. If we look down across the other side of the county, San Ramon is investing 44% of total outgo in its bargaining unit salaries. They have 0 vacancies, right? Different reality there. Same state, same funding. They do things differently. So there's ways to look at it. This is not something that the union brought forward. We do want to participate in these discussions. We're very concerned with the disinvestment in our bargaining unit. We can't staff our classrooms, and it's a real crisis. We can't have a school district where the program is teaching and we don't have teachers to deliver the program, right? That should be the #1 priority, not an idea of avoiding a structural deficit that never comes to pass. We need to put Chicken Little back in her cage and, look at reality and work together to prioritize students. And that means a certificated permanent educator in every classroom.
Thank you. Dr. Moses?
I love it when you talk, Mark. And I wish your perspective was our reality. What you present is true. However, what you're presenting is a total picture of all revenues coming to the district. And we all know that what we have to do when it comes to addressing our operating budget is separate those restricted funds that are for specific things. We are very healthy on the restricted side. If I could take all of the ELOP funding, if I could take all of we don't have it anymore, but when we had ESSER funding, you're right. We had a bunch of money that was pinned for specific purposes, not our instructional program. So if I could do with the restricted funds what we can do with the unrestricted funds, it would erase our problem. It absolutely would. The reality is the state doesn't allow for that. The state says you have to use unrestricted funds to identify your 3% reserve. You have to use unrestricted funds to pay for your base services, which includes our classroom teachers. I can't take from the 50 million that's sitting on the unrestricted side and pay for our classroom teachers. I agree with you that staffing our district is our priority. We can't have great experiences and classrooms and schools for our students without staff. Staff run the district. You're here representing UTR, but I'm also super concerned about Teamsters, right? I hear what you're saying about the salary schedule. There are some dead years in your salary schedule. However, it's not just your unit that has step and column. Every unit has step and column. The other units don't have gaps, but they cap at a specific year. I appreciate that for the teacher salary, you don't do that because we don't want teachers to leave us after year 10 when the salary's capped, right? So it's necessary for you to have a longer salary schedule so that we can be attractive to folks to come and teach in our district. So we are prioritizing dollars on our classroom. And the reason why you don't see it so much in those calculations is because where possible, we do bring in those restricted funds. The reason why we bring in those restricted funds, and I'm going to give you an example because I'm trying to build some understanding, is because we don't have enough to afford our expenditures in the unrestricted fund. One of the things that we do in our district that I think is wonderful and it attracts staff is we have smaller class sizes, right? San Ramon may not have any vacancies, but they aren't battling the perception of what it means to teach in Richmond. They may say, I'll take a larger class size over here in San Ramon because in Richmond, I know there are going to be other kind of challenges that are uncomfortable for beginning teachers or what have you. We have to work on this from both sides. We have to work on the perceptions of what we offer here because I think we offer great things. I do know we have to do more in terms of the overall competitive salary, not just for UTR, but for Teamsters and all of our labor units, but we can't do that until we right the ship. It's the story that I've been preaching, and it's the story that I want to fix. The reality is we have to work together to fix it. You say that we've had a 50 million in additional revenue or 40% increase in our revenue, and we've only increased salaries 17% or 14%. The reality is the bulk of those increases were restricted. We don't have a 40% increase in LCFF. If we had a 40% increase in LCFF, we can give you everything you asked for. But that isn't our reality. So I'm just going to ask that everybody work with us to understand what's happening with this budget perspective. Let's try and find a way to do what we all want to do. We can have whatever we want. We just can't have everything because we don't have unlimited dollars. So committed to getting to being an attractive district for future staff and working together to get there. I'm going to walk you through this budget in a really detailed way at the budget subcommittee next week and also at the first interim report next Wednesday. And one of the things you're going to hear is this, and then I'm going to stop. So at first interim, we ran into some hiccups. We ran into some hiccups because the expenditures exceed what we budgeted for. We tried to be less conservative because we hear you. Some of our estimates aren't always right, but we underestimated. And because we underestimated, we had a unique problem that we had to address. We can't create more money. We don't have more money. So in order to address the problem, we creatively looked at our programs and said, what can we do? Okay. Because we have smaller class sizes than what's required by the state, we were able to shift a portion of salaries to learning recovery. If we weren't able to do that, we would be negative qualified for our budget next week, for our first interim. We don't want to be negative. We don't want to be qualified. We want to be positive. So we use the restricted monies in a way that we could in order to be sure that we could meet the certification of positive. But in order to do it, we had to take our base services and shift them over to restricted, which is usually against the rules. But because we have smaller class sizes, we moved $13 million to restricted, and we're still struggling to meet our 3% reserve in year 3. I agree with you that the numbers are estimates. It's our best estimate in the time. And I also agree that in the past, the estimates haven't really been spot on. I was working on some financials today and I looked at what they predicted in our last fiscal solvency plan, and what they predicted we would have for revenue is extremely higher than what we really do have. So they weren't very conservative. Now we're trying to figure out how to meet our needs, not go back under county oversight. And that's a difficult dance to conquer, but we're doing it. And we're going to be transparent about it. We're not hiding it. Learning recovery was sitting there to try and build, we were supposed to have new strategies for supporting our students in their learning. Instead of new strategies, we're finding that we needed to sustain the contracts that we already have in order to stay afloat. It's hard. However, we're giving you all of the pieces of our budget in a transparent way because we need for you to trust that what we're saying is true. I can't speak for anybody before me, but I can absolutely tell you that what I'm looking at now isn't what I thought I'd see when I was sitting on the other side of the table, because I too said, they're hiding money somewhere. They got money. But what I'm finding out is the money that we have is restricted, and we have to find creative ways to get it over to the operating budget. And that money is not constant. Because you don't know from year to year whether the state is gonna renew a grant, or whether they're gonna, what their formula is gonna be for how they award ELOP, right? So there are all these unknowns that we have to guess at, and if we guess wrong, then it could be at the detriment of the district in a way in which we don't wanna see. So I'm gonna be transparent with you next week. I do know we need to do something to be competitive. We need to figure it out. I'm with you on that, and I want to use COLA to do it, but the reality is what we have to spend out currently exceeds what we bring in on the unrestricted side, and we've got to address that first. And if it means we make some positions temporary positions instead of permanent positions, I'll go with you on that, but you gotta help me. Because people also don't like to sign on to work in districts if they know their job is gonna be reviewed each year to see if we can continue to afford it. So we need to look at longevity too. So that was a long explanation. But I'm passionate about our budget, trying to get it right and trying to give everybody what they need, because we do need the staff. I'm with you on that. And if I could say with certainty we can afford to assign COLA, I'd say let's do it. But I can't say that today. And that's just where we stand.
Okay, well, thank you. We get to do this again on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate the conversation. We are over time now, but I will say that the reason why I put this forward is because there are two districts in the South Bay who do really great with their retention, and they're big districts. Palo Alto and Menlo Park, every year they put into their budget on their policy, board policy, a percentage that is the minimum that teachers, administrators classified will get. And it's in their budget forever, right? I think Menlo Park's 2.5%. I think Palo Alto is like 1.5 or something. Like that's just a minimum. They usually negotiate maybe more or even less depending on the year if both sides agree, but at least a minimum they budgeted. So then that's why it came from. I was like, that's a really cool way to tell future employees that you care about them, right? That like you're keeping up with cost of living. Now for them, obviously, it's well, not much more, it's gotten so expensive over here, but it's very expensive. Although, their teachers there make like 185. So we also got to keep that in perspective. But I thought it was like a really cool way to tell them, their employees, that they are prioritized through our budget. I'm not saying that we don't do that, because we do it in different ways. But that's really where it came from. So anyways, I think that we can continue to discuss. I want to maybe discuss in January more about the out years. Because I understand that right now I don't think that we can move forward with this policy under the current budget. So I want to discuss it like in the future, right? And whether or not we want to actually put something in place once our budget is the way that we wanted for new revenue. Dr. Moses.
Just the last word. So, I looked up Menlo Park School District. They're a basic aid district.
Yeah.
And what that means is they generate their funding based upon their property values. We are not a basic aid district. We're reliant upon the state. So that's a big difference. They're able to do that because they can count on their home values going up, therefore their school revenue going up. We can't count on that.
I should have had last word.
Doing this, and I'm like, oh, that's how they're doing it. They're basic aid. So, but yeah, I do still think there's something that we can do, but I think it's something that we have to work on together, because we are not basic aid. We don't live in an area where the home prices are going up every year, and therefore the school revenue is going up every year.
Can I ask a question? A small one?
Yeah.
A quick one?
Yeah.
I do want to know more about, I think it was called Dead Years. Is that what it's called? Dead Years?
Mhm.
I do want to learn more about that. It doesn't have to be now, it doesn't have to be in this section or this session. But I do want to know more about dead years. I did want to dive into a training district because that struck me like, whoa.
Mhm.
It's like when they say that Hercules is a bedroom community or whatever,
Mhm,
like you just
mhm.
kind of like, so there's these terms that I want to, it's not salacious. Isn't it bedroom community that they call it?
I don't know what solutions.
Oh, well.
That didn't help me.
Okay, so it's these terms that I want to know because they have a deeper meaning. Bedroom community means that Hercules is a very sleepy community, not a lot's happening in it, and people just kind of drive by it, drive through it. I want to learn more about what you mean about a training district, which I believe it's like people come here, they learn how to do it, then they
And then
take
they
off
leave
and go
us.
somewhere else for better money.
Yeah.
That's it? Okay.
Mhm.
And then I do want to have a conversation about what it means when you say total percent of outgo. I don't understand what the word outgo means, but I'm assuming that that can be explained to me. So how much we spend on when we're put, okay, so that's self-explanatory.
Mhm.
And then, I do like the consensus of prioritization of the classroom, because I think
Mhm.
everybody is saying that. So what does that look like? How does that come to fruition? And then, that's what that is. Okay. That's the only thing that I had questions about that was brought up here. I want to learn more about that, so then we can be totally solution oriented,
Mhm.
because we're all having the same conversation or understanding of the same thing. So when we do our board training around budget
Mhm.
and around unions and around all of that, some of those definitions would really help me out, and the conversations would really help me out. I'm complete.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Okay, and with that said, we have quite a few things that are coming back in January. So we'll schedule that meeting. Yeah, Mr. Mitchell, you have a question?
Just, there's another agenda item on there, which was the future policies to consider.
Oh, yeah.
And I just wanted to highlight the last one on the list, which is right of first refusal for educators displaced from any charter schools whose
Oh,
charters
yeah.
revoked within West Contra Costa. We have a dire need for educators, and we have 5 charters that are up for renewal, not all of them doing wonderfully. And so I would think that would be a great way to hold them accountable and also get some great new educators in our district. We consider that policy sometimes. So.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
I would also like to move up some of the things, because some of these we've talked about, but the racial equity community oversight policy, the one that Mr. Mitchell just talked about, the district's response to death of a student. I think we have to start talking about that, because it's unfortunately a yearly thing that we deal with and what sites deal with. And the final one, I would like to, I'm curious about, I still don't know where this one comes from. One of us said,
This one came from Trustee Reckler. I actually found it on minutes.
go ahead, I'm complete.
Okay. We will definitely talk about all of these, at one point. I do want to mention that obviously with new leadership, I might not be the chair of this committee, you might not even be in it, so we'll see what happens. Because, also all this depends on who will be in the committee, right? So all this might change by next month. So we do want to be thoughtful of that. But we'll schedule at least the next meeting, and then, hopefully we're both still in this committee. So I think I'd love for us to continue, but yeah. Okay, well then I'll adjourn us at 7:18.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.